Friendly warning.
Friendly warning, we're live.
Okay, so Tomasz, I think I can pass the word to you.
Okay,
so what
thanks.
is the topic today?
Topic today, behavior-driven development. So, who has tried it from here? Yeah, okay, you. Or have heard about it and did try it. Okay, so we have two. Okay, so what is it all about? Go on, please. Yeah, in the newsletter, I have let Martin set up a few questions about BDD. So I will try to answer them, convince you that it's a good thing. Probably in future we can convince most of our clients that it's a good thing. And yeah, get the idea, what is it all about? So space, please. Yeah, so come on. So what is BDD? Oh, no, go back and down. Yeah. So if you look at the Wikipedia, you will receive something like this. It's a methodology which make use of current test-driven development techniques, domain-driven design, and communication all together. Yeah. Why should I take interest into some new or not new additional methodology if I have already tried 12 of them? The BDD itself is, let's say, framework or methodology or tool which you can use to communicate across all the people and all the roles you have in the project. So it's not purely for developers or purely for QA. It is something which connects together users, customers, business analysts, UX guys, developers, QA. And it gives you a tool how you can communicate on the same level. So when we are talking about BDD, one of the very first names you will find is a cucumber. So go on. To be sure. Oh, come on. That's a cucumber. Yeah. Cucumber is a tool, it's a library, which you can use to write acceptance tests. So that's the important part, because when you are communicating with customers, with users, you want to define what your application, what your software, what your product is going to do, what, in which cases the customer is convinced to say, okay, this is working as I want it, it's fine. Yeah. The Cucumber itself is really a cross-platform tool, and the cross-platform doesn't mean just Windows, Linux, OS X, but it really means, come on, say hello. The cross-platform means really web applications, desktop applications, and mobile applications. Of course, across all of these platforms. Yeah, go on. From the developer perspective, there are no limits to just some pure set of technologies. The Cucumber library itself is available for all major platforms we are using, and also some very fancy ones. So the origin is from the Ruby and Ruby on Rails community, but it has spread quite quickly also to the other platforms. So you have the implementation for Python, for Java virtual machine, there's the Cucumber JVM. The .NET guys have a separate project called SpecFlow. In JavaScript, we have Cucumber.js. The Go, C++, Objective-C guys have also all of them. It's not very complicated library. So porting it to a new platform, it's mostly about porting the idea and the mechanism. It's nothing really complicated. So please go on. Space is the best one. Yeah. Gherkin. The second word you can Google when you enter the BDD world. So what is Gherkin? Go on. Easy. Do you see the difference? Yeah, go on. Gherkin is a language which you are using for recommunication, which is the core part of the behavior-driven development. So hopefully it can be seen correctly. So this is really a specification of some feature of some application. It doesn't matter if it should be running on a mobile device, in a mobile application, should be a desktop, should be a web. Really, it doesn't matter. It's written in pure English. There are about 40 keywords which are kept as something like a standard. And when you give something to a normal computer user, manager, product owner, anyone, he can be able to read it, understand it, and say, yes, this is the feature I want. This is how it should work. Yeah. So sometimes when people entering the BDD world, they think, that's great, I have my set of scenarios, features, specifications, I can use it for testing of everything, that would be great. So, go on please. The BDD methodology is not a tool which will replace your existing QA tools and QA processes. It's really not meant to be. But, and this is a very hardly got experience. Last year, our Q engineer has spent 2 months investigating the existing QA tools, some of them for the real enterprise money per license. I think they have tried, how many? 7? Something like that. 6 to 8 really big tools. And none of the tools was able to cover all the platforms we needed. And it wasn't so complicated. It's something you need today almost always. We need Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Safari, iOS phone, iOS tablet, the same with Android, plus the Microsoft Surface. So nothing fancy. When you are developing web application, this is your usual target platform. And none of these tools were able to cover all of them. And we are not speaking about native applications. So everything, all of them were just web applications. Yeah, so please go on. Third thing you will find by the BDD is the concept of Three Amigos. So who are Three Amigos? Maybe these guys will help us. Or this one. Yeah. So one role by the Three Amigos are these stakeholders. So these are the people who we either love or hate. So the product owners, in some companies, product managers, the UX guys, direct customers or users. So these are the people who are saying what they want. And BDD and Gherkin is helping us to formulate it. Second role is a QA engineer. This guy is there to think about some edge cases and what needs to be tested, what not, what belongs there, you know, QA guys. And the third role, that's you and me. And these 3 people are sitting, yeah, you do. You were the first role. These people should sit all together, that's why 3 Amigos. They should create those Gherkin specifications. They must agree that all of them understand them in a similar manner and create, it's like the user stories in our agile methodology. So the features and scenarios that these 3 people create together are the specifications and requirements for our development. Yeah, so that's the answer to this question. What's the benefit? I think all of us have the experience that you start a project and you don't know what to do, or you have some idea what to do. So the BDD itself is trying to prevent it and give you at the very beginning the specification and requirements and the acceptance criteria, because what is written in the specifications, that's what the customer wants. And at the end, you can run these specifications against your application, and you can ensure yourself that it's really doing what it should be doing. Yeah. So, and some technical part now. What is under the hood? Because till now you don't need computer nearly. Yeah. So Cucumber is really just a layer between the specifications written in the Gherkin language, so those English written texts, and the library, which is working as a connector to your application. So when we are talking about the web application, the usual library which is used is something from the Selenium stack. The guys who are working, for example, on the Android native devices are using some library from Android. Very similar to the guys who are doing iOS. If you are writing desktop application, for example, in .NET, you have also libraries to interact with the application automatically. So that's why it's not so problematic to migrate with the Cucumber library itself to another platform. It's just a connection between two worlds. Yeah. So by the web, mostly Selenium and Selenium WebDrivers. And just few technical notes. Again, experience hardly earned. Try to use the latest versions. Don't stick to older ones. We have been successfully running the tests on Chrome and Firefox, both Windows and OS X. The Internet Explorer 11 works also very good on Windows. Safari is working, but you have to install some very special extensions to Safari. And this is very fragile, so really keep an eye on the versions. From time to time with the Selenium version, they are releasing newer version of these extensions, and you really need to use the latest ones. The Microsoft Edge browser is partially supported now. They are working on it. Unfortunately, they are not feature complete at the moment. So some tests were working, some were failing, depends on the commands you need to, but they are working on it, and I think maybe half a year it will be working again.
80%.
Yeah, if you look into the feature matrix, they are somewhere like that. We know it takes 80% of the time. Yeah, that's clear. Go on, please. That wasn't the correct. Sorry. Yeah. By the mobile applications, both native and web applications, there's a project called Appium. It's based on some Node.js stack, and it implements the communication protocols for both mobile worlds. So you can choose what you can use, and really it starts the application in the browser on the mobile device, and it runs as you are clicking, so it works quite fine. With Android, it's very straightforward. You just install the Android SDK, configure this Appium, you connect the device, and it really starts working. It's really great. With the iOS, it's more complicated. I was able to get it working in the iOS simulators, which are part of the Xcode development tools. That works fine. With the native devices, it's a little bit more complicated. You need to install debugging proxy, which is a project from Google. Then you need to clone from GitHub a small project where you set up which application you want to use for the testing, at which address it is running, install it on the device, then connect to it, let it running. Yeah, at the end it works, but it was like 3 or 4 days just hitting the wall before it gets running. At the end, you have a very nice web debugging tool available on that mobile device, so you can use the Chrome development tools to debug the application running on the iOS device, which can be very, very helpful. Yeah, and with the Appium, you should be able also to test native applications, but in my projects, there is no direct experience. I have asked the guys who are developing the React native applications, and I think you are at the beginning and you are starting to use it, so probably it's working. Yeah. Questions? Maybe on Slack, something?
Okay, that's something to say. Okay, so I'm gonna say something, please correct me if I'm wrong, and then I'm gonna ask a question.
Sure.
So, BDD, so if you Google BDD in PHP, you will find a tool called VHAT.
Yeah,
It's
VHAT,
like the
yeah.
framework of BDD for PHP. So when I was like a single developer, I tried VHAT. For me, from the development perspective, it came down to writing exception tests. That's it.
Yeah, so even if you're a single developer, you have some customer,
Yeah.
and you can write the specification in Gherkin and use it for later usage.
Okay.
Also, you can give it to the results of the test because it generates some nice reports. You can give it to the customer. It's working as we have described. So
Okay, so the name behavior comes from writing those specifications for the
yeah, the behavior comes from behaving as a user of the application. So you are really simulating user behavior.
Okay, got it. So because when I was doing, for me, it was just like doing testing. Like I didn't think about it as behavior.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So my question is, because what's new in the presentation is that for BDD, like you have the stakeholder and you have
The Three Amigos.
Yeah, the Three Amigos, right? Okay. So we're talking about scenarios or behavior or story, the story that you want to
Storytelling.
Okay, so what I'm curious about is that how do you include these kind of processes in the current process that we use, for example, in Seamless, like because we sit down, we have a backlog, we talk about user stories, so like you can project that user stories might be the story that you want to test against, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
the scenario.
exactly how are you gonna do that? Like you're gonna sit down every week or before start a feature, you're gonna like go over the user story and how do you extract the stories from the user story that you have in the agile?
Yeah, you have nearly already answered because the BDD is taking into consideration the test-driven development principles. So it's really about writing the specification, the features based on the user stories first. So that the details depends on your project if you are really doing it at the very beginning of the project or if you are making something like a small grooming session at the beginning of the sprint. That really depends on the project. But definitely the scenarios should be written, must be written before the development itself. Because you as a developer, when you are reading the scenarios, all of them with different edge cases and variants and different, let's say, data sets which are coming into the test, you really receive the information and you really get much better idea of what should be developed. It reduces the noise during the development, reduces the number of problems, misunderstandings, bugs, everything. And that's also why the developer is sitting by the Three Amigos, because during this session, he is already thinking about some implementations, maybe some problems, some integrations, or another requirements which are maybe not visible only on the first side.
Can I have two questions? The first one is you mentioned like in the slides that you did and like what you said, you talked about like it seems that all what you mentioned is about like the UI, like interaction with the application from the UI perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What about like when you are creating like an API or something that doesn't have?
Okay, good question. We have used the same strategy also for functional tests, which are testing the APIs.
Okay.
You get that's because Cucumber does not force you what you are using for the interaction. So if you want to test a web application in Angular, you are choosing Protractor. If you are using React, you are maybe using WebDriver IO library, or you can use the Selenium API itself. But I have used, for example, Node.js, and I think Super Agent is called the module for Node.js, and I have been creating the scenarios which are testing the API of the opposite side. So you are not forced just to UI. It's just the most used pattern.
Yeah.
So,
and my second question is there any like learning curve for the client to teach them like what is like I don't want to say the specifications, but how the language works or
the language is really simple stupid because what keywords you have there? Scenario, feature. Yeah. Can you maybe zoom it for a little bit? Yeah, so the given, these are the preconditions. Yeah, and then you have these when and then. So only these keywords which are at the very beginning of those sentences are those important, and everybody understands when, then. When I click login button, then I should be on my homepage.
Yeah, I see.
It's also possible to make these sentences with parameters. Yeah, you can see it in the double parentheses. And the Cucumber language is able to extract these strings out and give it to you as a parameter. So you can write a little bit more general stack, and just based on the parameter or the value of the parameter you have received to change the behavior. We are using it, for example, we are not writing one step for every button in the application, but we have names of these buttons, so then the users are using the names of the buttons in the descriptions.
Have you ever used it that the specification is written by the customer, or always you write it and let it check?
No, it's really written, in our project it was written by the UX guy together with the QA engineers, and we have been just reviewing them and checking it.
But not customer still.
In our case, the UX guy was the representative of the customer. So it was really not written by us, the specification. We have been implementing the test steps and then the test
So every time he needs like another type of sentence,
he just write it down. The Cucumber complains, hey, I don't know this sentence, and creates something like an empty template.
So he was really writing English sentences, and
Yes.
you either corrected the format so the parsing is exactly the same like you have, or created a new.
Yeah, there were really no corrections in the Gherkin syntax because it was when, then, and, or, given. Yeah, it's really simple, stupid.
And how is it working in the real?
In the real?
Yes, where can you see the results? It's just interface where you describe edge cases and use cases.
Yeah,
and then, for example, you are using some web application with Angular, then you need to write those tests to match your requirements.
Yeah, the implementations of these sentences is then written, in our case, was written in JavaScript with Protractor, and so the usual selectors for the elements on the web page, working with that was written purely in JavaScript. But as I said, you are not targeted to one platform. You can also mix the platforms. So, for example, guys who are writing the Java portal for the UK customer, they are using Cucumber based on the Ruby technology. So their behavior scenarios are written in Ruby, and the application is written in Java. It's no problem. You can mix the technologies.
And can you see how many use cases are covered?
Yeah, the Cucumber generates huge reports where you have each scenario written, each test step. Does it success? Does it fail? For example, we had implemented when it fails, it makes a screenshot of the web application, so you can also see that it's really wrong. So, for example,
coverage you cannot see because you cannot define what is 100% claim.
Yeah, well, okay, this is not about code coverage.
Yeah, I know, but still, like coverage of all the use cases.
It will say that it is undefined 300 scenarios and 3 are failing. So
yeah, that's I mean, like if you like the coverage of all scenarios, you cannot define because it's undefinable.
No. If you remember the testing parameter from Martin Fowler, where you have a lot of unit tests, less integration tests, and then the UI tests. So this is the top of the parameter.
Yeah, I was about to ask you like how it usually takes like how much time it takes to execute those tests and how frequently you execute them.
Well, the execution, how many we had? About 80 tests were running 2-3 minutes, something like that. Some depends on the hardware. So our MacBooks
Depends on the platform.
Yeah, and also it was, for example, when we were running the tests on the Android device itself, then it's really about the performance you have at the Android. So on some low Android device, it really takes much longer. It's also about the browser itself. In Chrome, Firefox, it's running very quickly. In Safari, it's a little bit less, and when you run it on the Internet Explorer, you can expect 2-3 times more. But still, we were able to let it running after each push. So
I see.
No problem with that. Yeah, they were expecting that in future there are going to be not only these behavior tests written in Gherkin, but also something like a regression scenarios, which are going to be very long. So it will really go through the whole application through some complicated process and let it running repeatedly that, for example, we don't have memory leaks and this type of stuff. Also, so that's again something you run during the night or something like that. Also, there are services which you can use for let you testing on real devices. What was the name? I think Amazon is now offering device testing as a service. Probably in Azure is also something available. Sorry? Appium is also offering it, and DevStack, or there are at least 2 or 3 other services where you can rent a real device, and they are offering interface to these devices, which is based on this Selenium WebDriver protocol. So you just configure it as a different type of device, and your tests are letting run over the cloud somewhere on a real device. So even if you don't own all the devices, you can rent them for testing while this web protocol.
Can you create those virtual
Yes.
devices?
Yeah, it's a real device.
I
Which
see
is
something
using
not virtual testing. It's really like testing on mobile devices. And I know that actually guys from our project, they were trying to actually create this here also in CN. They did something like on the project as a start, to actually create all these like Selenium WebDriver and so on. Just the devices that when you run the test, it's just actually pushed and actually automatically executed on the mobile devices. But we are actually planning to make some kind of a internal project for having this as a across the projects. So we would like to do this.
Browser Stack is one of those companies.
Yeah. And they offer the virtual version as well as
the physical devices. Yeah, so it's not cheap.
Must be expensive, yeah.
But yeah, it can save a lot of time or money in future. So maybe you don't need to have it with each test, but maybe twice a week just to let it run through really different set of devices. There are different add-ons to this. For example, there was a possibility that when you have an application with a reference screenshots and you are producing screenshots from the tests, you can make something like the OCR comparison. And when it differs more than, let's say, 2%, it fails, or it is generating the heat maps. Where are the differences? So also from the design and UI perspective itself, is possible to automate it into some level. On Slack, no questions?
No questions, I'm checking it.
Okay, so thanks a lot. I hope you enjoy.